Hey guys, I'm going to start doing the next painting tutorial, and it's going to be on the Troll Hunt miniature, which you can see here. I'll be painting up the base probably as the last bit, once I figured out how to actually cut that wood. Still haven't managed to get into the garage to get to my tools yet, unfortunately, but I will figure out how to actually sort of cut that wood, and then that'll be the last section of this, is actually making the base, finishing it all off. So for the moment, all I've done with the figure is stick it together, so sticker arms on basically, and I've put a small pin in the bottom of the foot, not big, not for any sort of stability or anything, just so that I can maneuver her around whilst I'm painting. So I decided that previously on the other painting video I didn't actually show you how I did the zenithal highlighting, the initial sort of base coat that we worked from the sort of the black to white shading to show up the sort of the highlighting, the shadows on it. So I thought I'd show you how to do that, and I thought I'd also show you how I use an airbrush to go about that. So this is my airbrush. I've got a compressor, which I'm fairly sure you'll be hearing later on, because it's not the quietest. It's not too bad though. It does sort of, it's got a tank on it, so it does sort of pressure up and then sort of keep itself topped up pressure wise as it goes along, so it's not too bad. This is my airbrush. It's a Iwata HPB Plus. It's a very nice airbrush. I also have, if I can just reach it, one of the Iwata Neos. I got the one with the bottle on the bottom of it, and in all honesty I'm regretting it. I really wish I'd gone for the gravity feed like this one, because the bottle, it's functional, works perfectly well, but the problem with it is that you do require an awful lot of paint. You can just see sort of in there, I think maybe there, that is actually a tube that goes all the way down to the bottom of the bottle, almost all the way down to the bottom of the bottle. So what happens is you need a sort of a reservoir of a couple of millimeters of paint before it actually starts working. So it's not particularly sort of good for small jobs. It's great for batch undercoating, things like that, batch priming, stuff like that, because you can just sort of get a nice big amount of primer in there, and then off you go, do an entire army. Very fast way of priming. I'd say it's possibly slightly better for priming than a spray can, because a spray can you have to use outside, which means you're limited on the weather. And I'm filming this at about 7 o'clock at night in the winter in Britain, so it is pitch dark out there, and it's probably down to about 2 degrees, so far from ideal priming conditions. So the airbrush allows me to actually prime, which is nice. So the primer I'm going to be using on this, let me just get that out of the way for a second. We're going to be using the Vallejo Model Air Grey Primer. This is quite a nice grey, it's quite a light grey. I've seen different shades of it, which is strange. This pot originally started out as quite a sort of mid-grey, neutral grey colour, but I got a sort of one of the 250ml refill bottles that they do, sort of this kind of size bottle, and that's actually a lot lighter in colour. Not that it matters, because it's a primer at the end of the day, you're not going to see it. So we've got that. For the sort of the black side of things, for the zenithal highlighting, we've got Tamiya's, or Tamiya, depending on how you want to pronounce it, Flat Black XF1. Tamiya colours are excellent for airbrushing. Do not try and brush them on with an actual brush, it just doesn't work. They are way too thin to do that. They are fantastic for airbrushing though, highly recommend them. I would say they're probably better than the Model Airs. They come out really quite well. For my particular airbrush, they also do a thinner, excuse me one second, they also do a thinner, and I usually thin at about 50-50 paint to thinner. In this particular instance, this airbrush is extremely fine. It's mainly designed for detailed work, The needle on it is 0.2 mil. I'll actually take the cap off and I can show you. That's the actual needle tip there. You can just see against my hand, so you can see that's the actual needle. It's incredibly fine, and it does need some very, very diluted paint. You need with this airbrush. I spent ages with this airbrush getting seriously annoyed with it because I just could not get the paint dilution right. And in all fairness, I was trying to paint with just sort of Vallejo model colour and whatever else I had thinned down with water, which just doesn't work. With the Neo, it's got a bigger. I'm not entirely sure. I think it's a 0.35 or something. But the needle on that's a lot significantly bigger than this is, and you can get away with a lot more. So that's the kit I'm going to be using. Oh yeah, and the white is the flat white XF2 from Tamiya as well. So I've already pre-mixed 2 bottles of those. I tend to pre-mix the Tamiyas because they're quite nice. You use them a lot for the military modelling. I've also got a ratty old sort of paint pot holder type thing. You've probably seen these around on sort of eBay and the like. They're quite handy. You just stick your airbrush in and it allows you to empty them out, and they've got a filter in the top so you don't breathe in all the junk. I would highly recommend, if you're going to do airbrushing, you get a face mask. Strongly recommend it. I won't be actually airbrushing with a face mask at the moment because I need to talk to the camera, but if you're going to be airbrushing for a long period of time, get a face mask, because you'll think to yourself, oh, why bother? But after you've finished painting half an army green with an airbrush and then wake up the next morning with the worst nose blockage you've ever seen in your life, which is the same colour as the paint you've been using the previous night, you'll understand why. It's highly recommended. I hate to imagine what they're doing to your lungs, to be honest. So yeah, so usual thing with the airbrush, push down for air like that and then pull back for paint. As you can see, mine's a little bit sticky at the moment. It needs a bit of a clean out. That was the compressor, by the way. I do intend to do a sort of full-on airbrush video, but this isn't going to be it, although it's slowly turning into it anyway. So let's get on with it. So the first thing we're going to do is, I'll pull the camera out ever so slightly, there we go. We can see a bit better now. So first thing I'm going to do is just load up with a bit of the primer. We're not going to need much in here at all. So normally what I'd do is I'd have a bit of paper or something nearby just to test the colour on, but this will do for the moment. So there we go, nice splodge of grey for us. So all I'm going to do now is just generally sort of coat the miniature. The slightly ironic thing with this being a resin miniature is that the grey is almost identical to the actual resin grey. Which actually makes it quite difficult to paint because you can't see where you've been. So there we go, and also that's the reason why the other side of this is covered in paint. So there we go. So absolutely no difference whatsoever, other than the fact she's now actually primed. So next job is just empty out the airbrush. What you can also do is, the nice thing is a lot of people use a hairdryer or something along those lines for actually sort of delivering hot air to a miniature to actually sort of dry the paint. With an airbrush, free air. So as long as you're not actually sort of pulling back, you're fine. So there we go. So she looks dry enough at the moment. So what I'm going to do now, put her to one side for a sec, and we're just going to clean out the airbrush. Now this is done obviously using an airbrush cleaner, and the one I prefer using, particularly for Vallejo paints, is the actual Vallejo airbrush cleaner. So a little bit in the cap, swill it around. It's useful if you just keep a little pot of water and then just spray straight into this, so you can see it emptying out nicely there. So for a basic clean out between colours, that'll do pretty much. If you want to get really involved, you can go through it with a little bit of water. I've just got some plain water in a sort of little bottle there, and then you can just run it out. Good way to check if it's clean is to run it onto your hand. If your hand just looks wet, that's fine. If you can see colour still coming out of it, then obviously you just need to clean that off slightly. This airbrush really desperately needs a clean. Maybe I'll make that in the next video. So, same trick again, this time with the black. So we're not going to need too much black, so that should do the trick. So again, quick test of the colour. There we go. So that's actually far too thin, to be honest. It's going to be very, very difficult to paint with that. There we go, that's a little better. Okay, seriously need to clean this, it's terrible. Okay, so the next trick is to actually paint her pretty much from that angle, really. Because what you're aiming to do is you're aiming to hit all the low areas on the model, which is also again why I've got her connected to this rather than anything else, because it's a lot easier getting to the bottom. So from a fair distance away, we're talking sort of yay far, we're just going to hit it with you can already see it going dark. So I'll probably do a bit more on there, but that's the general idea that you're looking for, really. So there's a little bit up under there. Probably actually hit it. A bit more. There definitely should be more under the skirt. So that will do for the black. So as you can see, now I'll hit it from this angle a little bit, so I'm aiming for sort of lower belly, just under the chin kind of thing. This is going to be quite a gentle, there we go. So it's going to be quite a gentle sort of thing. Now don't worry too much if it goes sort of over the top and it looks a bit weird, but what you should get is you should see that it looks fairly light from that angle and pretty much pitch black from that angle. That's the kind of look you're after. So that's the first stage. So again, quick clean of the airbrush, just get it ready for the next colour. This time especially because you've got black in there at the moment and your next colour is going to be white, so you want to really sort of get in there and get all of the black out as much as you can. So otherwise you're just going to end up painting it with grey again. So again, just emptying out the reservoir into pot like that. I'm going to go in there with a fair amount of water probably. Okay, here we go. So, again, give it a good shake, mix it up. I've had this pot of white for quite some time, it's leaving bits behind, but should do quite nicely. So there we go. So excellent. So you can see when it actually covers, it's not actually completely opaque when it covers, which is what you're looking for really. So obviously sort of the more you put on, the more opaque it becomes, but it still has that sort of transparency, that translucent effect. So here we go again. So this time, of course, we're painting from the top of the miniature down onto it, because this is the lights essentially. And what you'll find is that this will actually cover up some of the work. So for example, you can see on the stomach area it's almost completely black, which isn't ideal, and that's because I was working from that angle to sort of hit under the chin and under the breasts and things like that, but it had the side effect of hitting the entire stomach. So we're going to rectify that now by hitting it in this direction, which is why you paint the white last, because it's the highlights that make the figure more believable than the shadows, really. Well, I think so anyway. So here we go. And there we go. So I might do a bit more on this, we'll just see. But you can see the stomach area is looking a lot more defined now. You've got some large highlights there, but you've got a lot more definition sort of on the muscle structure around there now. So we've got a lot to work from. I think the back I think is all right as it is. Because it does curve in, but a back sort of does curve like that quite a lot. So a lot of sort of, blimey, that's a big brush. Let's try that end. A lot of the back there is actually going to be in shadow because it's sort of because it's so curved in, and a lot of her hair is covering it. Same with sort of the lower legs and sort of underneath in the crotch area and back of the hair there and under the arms and stuff like that. They're all going to be. So again, there you go. So a lot of lights, a lot of darks. It's quite a nice effect there. I like that. So that is essentially how you zenithal highlight a figure, really, or at least how I do it anyway. You can do this with spray cans. I have seen people do it, but you end up with a lot more of a dotty effect because of the way the spray cans are. The paint out of them tends to come out a lot more dotty. So again, with this, I'll bring it right up. You can see there's very little actual sort of graininess about the paint. I mean, considering you're essentially spraying pure white pretty much on top of pure black, there's very little actual graininess. Whereas if you do this with spray cans, so you get a can of can of black paint, can of white paint, and try it, you'll get pretty much the same effect. In all honesty, you know, sort of spray it from that direction, spray it from that direction, you'll get pretty much the same effect. But you'll find it's a lot more dotty effect, especially on sort of the less sort of directly in the shadows, directly in the highlights areas, sort of on the flat of the stomach and things like that. It tends to be quite dotty because you just get sort of spots of paint hitting it rather than lots of paint. But yeah, so there you go. She is now ready for base coats, I think. given how much skin tone there is on her, I am probably going to airbrush on the skin tones. I'm going to debate what colours to actually use. I'm thinking she might be sort of darker skinned than I normally paint, but not sort of real sort of mahogany type colour. Just a sort of I don't know really. Difficult to say. I'll have a look for paints anyway and see what comes to mind. Maybe a sort of Native American type look, rather sort of a more sort of a reddish skin tone than a sort of mahogany chestnutty type skin tone. No, chestnut would be about right when we're talking about. Anyway, so I've obviously lost the plot, so I should probably call it there. So there we go. Zenithal highlighting in more time than was necessary, to be honest. You can do it a lot faster if you're not trying to talk to a camera. Alright, cheers guys, I'll catch you later.